But I want to do something different today. You know, I like this band called Guns N' Roses, and I was listening to a song from there. And so I'm going to start with the quiz for about 5 minutes, kind of to warm up the audience. And then we have a panel. So when do you think the first women diplomats were allowed to serve? Which year, broadly? And for the right answer, I will throw a rose. No, which year? Approximately when did most countries across all cultures, when were the first women diplomats allowed to enter service? Who said that? Okay, you get a rose. Who was the first diplomat in all cultures? Who was the first? Can you give me a name of a diplomat? Okay, let's start with an Indian diplomat. Who was the first Indian woman diplomat? Vijay Lakshmi Pandit. Yes, here you go. Who was the first diplomat from France? Because we have a French woman here. Does anyone know? Hi, Dana, welcome. Her name is Suzanne Borel. Who was the first American woman diplomat? The first woman diplomat. Her name was Eugenie Anderson. So the point I'm making is that until about the 1950s, women were not allowed to be in the foreign service for a variety of reasons. Can anyone give? I will start with one of the reasons that was given, which is that women are the softer sex, and in order to negotiate, you need to be tough and therefore masculine. What are some of the other reasons that could have been given for preventing women from being in the diplomacy? Women aren't allowed to work at all. But specific to gender and posting in foreign cultures, you get pregnant. Yes. Women who got married were, in many cultures, asked to announce themselves, and if in many cultures said you cannot practice after you are married. If they were sent to some cultures, their honor might be compromised, and therefore women cannot be diplomats. Women who are attractive will not be liked, and women who are liked will be seen as too tough. So how do you negotiate this balance? That was another reason given. So with all these factors in mind, you are looking at some extraordinary women, because individually and collectively, they have broken barriers, not just for themselves, but for all the women who have come after them. Diplomacy, like many fields, is famously male. And since Ravi has done an introduction, and we had this idea that we would make it a little fun. We have some questions. We also have an old-fashioned sand timer, which we are going to use to keep our answers short so that you can have question time later. And I'm going to give a one-line introduction without mentioning the name of these diplomats, and I'd like you to guess who they might be. And so the quizzing continues. Dr. She has a PhD in history, culture, and literature about the English-speaking world, and held several senior consular positions before taking charge of as Consul General in Bangalore. Which of her might she be? You can just say by the color of the dress. Dr. Marjorie. Dr. Marjorie is a PhD. She worked for 25 years in the corporate world in the life sciences and renewable energy, co-founded a life sciences based startup, and is now Consul General in Bangalore, and also of the Innovation and Trade Center. Which country and which person might she be? And you can point to color.
Nicole.
Not Nicole. Huh? Not Dana. Denmark. Who said Denmark? Denmark and Jette. Jette? Okay. She was the ambassador to Portugal and Thailand, and she calls herself by this oxymoron. She calls herself a cyber peace warrior. Of course, Shri gets this. She worked in high-tech and non-profits before accumulating vast experience in the Foreign Service. She is Dana, correct. And the last one, she's an entrepreneur and a Foreign Service officer and also a Foreign Service child, and her name is Nicole Girard. So, thank you all for being here. And I'll start with a broad question, and then we will get into the nitty-gritty. So, what might be the top 3 issues that your countries are obsessing about, which will occupy your... I think all of you have... do you all have... Yeah. So, what might be the top 3 issues that your countries are obsessing about in 2020?
Shall I start?
Yeah.
If you read all papers about Danish foreign policy at the moment, it's climate everywhere. It's climate. And the percentage reductions that we are all running for, and the SDG 7. But we also know that we can't have climate changes without having talents involved in order to do the solutions that are needed. And then we comes back to gender, because basically we have the organization Women Deliver saying that you can't have climate changes without including men and women. So it all fits together in my book.
Climate change and gender for Denmark and for Canada.
So I agree with what Jette said. Definitely leadership and supporting global efforts on climate change. Canada is also a little different in that we have a feminist foreign policy and a feminist international assistance policy. So we'll continue to work to advance that. And then a third thing that I would mention is that we'll continue to reinforce multilateral institutions and the rules-based international order, which we all know is under threat, right?
If I can push a little bit, what does feminist foreign policy mean?
So let me come back to that when we answer some of the other questions.
Okay. Hello. Well, the reinforcement and maintainment of multilateralism is one. The other would be climate. You all heard about the Paris Agreement. And this being France, our foreign policy is also European policy. So you all heard that the European Union is not always doing as great as it should. So definitely European policy and building a stronger Europe.
I think for India, one of the most important challenges is going to be the Iran-US standoff. Because it's very important for us, because if the Gulf area gets destabilized, we have more than 7 million Indian citizens, living and working in the Gulf. And if we have to do another evacuation, as we had to do during the Iraq-Kuwait war, it's going to be very, very high on our list of priorities. So there's going to be regional implications, national implications, and global implications, depending on how the situation unfolds. Second issue, I think, for India would be the rise of China. And I see the major challenges coming up, which we have to be very concerned about, is their advancement in technology. With the 5G issue, with the artificial intelligence, robotics, I think we have to be very, very aware of this. And we need to be ahead of the game and get ahead of them in a certain sense, or at least anticipate what the moves are going to be. And finally, I think for India, it's going to be very important to think about how our domestic issues at the moment are going to impact our foreign policy. And how are we going to be perceived by the world? How is it going to impact our foreign policy? Very, very simply, and I hope I'm not running out of time, it's... if your diplomats are busy explaining all the time what's happening at home, you don't have time to take new initiatives, and you don't have time to push the other policies. Very, very important, therefore, to achieve some measure of consensus on domestic issues in order to have a successful foreign policy.
First of all, I owe you all an apology for being late. Maybe I should edit to the agenda of a obsession to get cured out of on our foreign ministry, or as me as a representative with it. But if I'm going to our national interest and how does we as diplomats trying to achieve it, and what is the obsession that we are all involved in, the first one we share with India, but from a different perspective, because we are in the region of the Gulf and the Middle East. So Iran for us is it's a immediate threat, a very complicated one. We don't have time to dive into that, but that's the first. The second one is in the same baskets of threats of security. And the role of a diplomat is to find ways to really create our power and eternus in other ways than the military one. And that is a basket of terrorism, anti-Semitism, and hatred at large. Again, I think that all of you are savvy. People who are coming to the BIC are people who knows the agenda, so I don't need to elaborate even more. The third thing, I want to look at it as a challenge, but an opportunity. And then I see my role here with our team in the consulate, and I share the same with each and every one of my colleagues here and the other consulate, is how do we help have a better future for our kids? And that also entails, of course, global warming. And for that, we have to partner when it comes to finding food security, agriculture solutions, water solutions, when we want to find innovative ways to have the next technological advancement, and when we want even to plant seeds of wisdom in our kids, that they will have the tools to innovate. So we need to put a lot of focus on education, and in all of those things, this is an obsession of our foreign ministry, and I'm sure that of each and every one of our foreign ministries. How do we connect nation to nation and find ways to have a better world for our children?
So we all agreed that once the discussion got going, we would add and interrupt and make it much more interactive. So this next question, I would urge you all to do that, because this is the meat of the discussion. In the BIC, you have a crowd that is very savvy with respect to gender and equality and things like that. So I would urge you to go one step further and tell us what it's like to be a female diplomat, and what are the challenges that you face. Are there anecdotes or specific incidents that shed light on this in a deeper way? And Marjorie, you want to start, or
Sure, I can start. It's great, first of all, because, I'm from a younger generation, so there are things that have been told by older female diplomats in my ministry that I haven't faced, or I have faced, maybe I've noticed that, but not in the obvious way that they may have faced in their time. There is the need for help from the diplomatic service, of course, to cater to the family needs. That's one thing. There is still, even my generation, there are guys who go abroad and they don't even question the fact that their partner is going to come with them. It's a given. For me, it's not. I'm grateful every single day that my husband is here with me. And I try to make sure that we are in conditions that, for him to feel, fulfilled as well. The second thing, those are things that you might share as well, is, we live in a very civilized world, but there are still some biases, and there's still some behaviors. They may not be seen, they may not be, official. People sometimes, when I say I have the feeling I didn't get as much of an opportunity to speak in that meeting as other people, you'd never know if it's you because you did not dare speak, or if they didn't let you speak. And there's always, so that's why in France, in my ministry, in my diplomatic service, we have an association of female diplomats, because it's good to speak between ourselves and realize, no, we're not mad. Something is happening, there are situations where you feel uncomfortable. So,
Do you force yourself to speak at meetings?
I have forced myself to speak at meeting. I have a clear conscience that I'm doing things as an individual, and I'm also doing things because I want this ministry, this diplomatic service, and more generally speaking, this world, to be more accommodating for females. And I found myself in a situation when I've said I could not say that. You know, the meeting could go on, and I say, okay, do it.
And why is it common for female diplomats to be in charge of the husband being happy in professions when he comes?
I come from a country where we've got an employment rate of women which is extremely high. But when it comes to having responsibilities, it's still very high. In my ministry, it's progressing quite rapidly. Something I should mention about the role of female diplomats and the status of female diplomats is that we implemented quotas a couple of years ago. We took a very bold move. There were lots of debates about it. I used to be against quotas about 15 years ago. Now I'm in favor of them, as far as I can believe that it's going to be a transitory measures. So it really helped raise the number of female ambassadors. For some reason that's unknown to me, Consul General are not part of the quotas. So, you know, I'm not part of a quota. Maybe I will someday. But it's a way of forcing the administration to go ahead. And it's also a way of, you know, putting females on the forefront, so they give an example to the next generation.
So for the latecomers, Marjorie is the Consul General of France in Bangalore. And anyone else who would like to go? Yeah. Nicole is from Canada.
I can go.
The mics are heavy. Yeah, stick it next to your chair. We'll get it. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So, Shoba, as you alluded to at the start, I come from a family of public servants, and I'm actually a second-generation diplomat. And in my father's career, when he started out in the 60s, there were very few Canadian diplomats. Wives followed their husbands around the world. And one little-known fact is that in the Canadian Foreign Service, way back in those times, they had a rule that if two diplomats married, the woman had to give up her job. Obviously, it's no longer like that, and I've joined the diplomatic corps in the last 5 years, later in my career, after 25 years of a domestic career. So I haven't had to sort of face many of these issues that others have faced along the way. But I mention that kind of personal history to say that on the Canadian landscape, things have changed very dramatically since my father's generation and his career. In the sense, to come back to your follow-up question to me earlier, Canada is now a global champion on gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls, and one of the ways that it does that is through a feminist approach across all policies, programming, diplomacy, development, trade, and security. One of the additional sort of layers to that more recently is that the mandate letters of Canadian government ministers are public. And each of those mandate letters, if you look at them, direct our ministers to apply a gender-based analysis to all of their decision-making, you know, as a framework in order to combat differential impacts of policies, of programs, of initiatives, you know, to strive towards greater equality. As Marjorie also mentioned is the case in France, Canada is also working towards greater parity of women and men in the diplomatic corps. And one of the reasons that I applied 5 years ago for this opportunity that I'm now having is because the government came out and boldly stated that its goal was to have fully 50% of women heads of mission. So I give that context to basically sort of say to be a Canadian female diplomat at this point in time is an incredible privilege. I also feel a tremendous responsibility to the mandate entrusted to me to grow Canada-India relations. And it's a fantastic time, I feel, to be in my position to have this opportunity, you know, to represent Canada abroad and here in particular. And I think in terms of those sort of pointier, more granular questions that you asked, I think there's a lot of similarities between women in our position face and other working women face around the globe, and women executives in particular, in terms of the expectations on us. You know, we're working very hard, we're working long hours. I'm sure everyone on this panel would agree. We're managing broad responsibilities at work, but I think one of the things that's a bit different for women diplomats is many of us are also managing on the home front. You know, we're overseeing what's happening on the home front, where we have partners, where we have children, and it's a bit like having a second full-time job at times. So I'll pause it there because my time is probably up.
No, I'm going to come back to that, but Latha. Yeah.
I just wanted to say, the Indian experience has been quite different. And unlike, is that okay? Is that working? Can you hear me? Yeah. Unlike a lot of other foreign services, our foreign service was open to women to enter right from 1950 onwards. And while we're very proud of Vijay Lakshmi Pandit, and she did a splendid job as the President of the General Assembly, she was a political appointee because she was the sister of the Prime Minister. Yes. She was very qualified, she did a great job. But the first professional woman to join the Foreign Service was C.B. Muthama from our very own Karnataka, from Coorg.
Yes.
And Ms. Muthama had to fight many barriers. I remember when I met her the first time, it's a funny story. She asked me, are you happy in the Foreign Service? And this would have been about 78 or so, when I'd been in the service 3 years. I joined in 1975, so now you all know how old I am, And so Ms. Muthama said, are you happy in the Foreign Service? And I said, yes, ma'am, I am. And she said, don't be so cocky. Just remember what we had to go through for you to get here. She was a tough cookie, but she had to be, because, she joined at a time when women had to resign if they got married. We had the same rule, but it changed very rapidly, because by the early 50s, married women were joining the service, not just getting married and staying in the service, but staying on in the service. And many women had been ambassadors by the time I joined the service. So it was, many doors were already open, many glass ceilings had been broken. And I think the fact that we've had 3 women foreign secretaries, which is the highest position that anyone can achieve in the foreign service. You're the head of the foreign service. The foreign minister, of course, and it so happens that one of our foreign secretaries is currently our foreign minister, but that's a political appointment. So we've had 3 women foreign secretaries. You've had women serving in China, in France. You've had women in Sri Lanka. You've had women in Bangladesh. You've had women in all the tough positions you can imagine. So I think the Indian Foreign Service, and strangely, though, I don't think India's record is very good when it comes to women in a lot of other fields. In the Foreign Service, I was astonished to learn that last year, 2019, the percentage of women recruited into the Foreign Service without a quota in the officer level, which means they all have a fair chance at becoming ambassador, is 40%.
Oh, that's brilliant.
And when I joined the service, it was closer to 10%. I mean, my batch was considered extraordinary because we had 4 women out of 24 in the batch. And that's about 15%, right? And it was always between 10 and 12, 10 and 12. And today, if you've got 40% women coming in, obviously the average has gone sky high. And these women are being put forward as the spokespersons in the UN, in other places. And they're doing a fantastic job. And I find they are very, very confident. And on the home front and juggling 2 jobs, to a certain extent, even though I'm single and I don't have a spouse and family to sort of consider, yes, even I had to do the job of the ambassador's spouse traditionally, that is, host the parties, look after the house, make sure that everything was done well. But the trick is delegate, delegate, delegate.
I'm going to come back and ask you, all of you, this question that you alluded to is, are you happy, or what is the pleasure and what is the pain of being a woman in foreign service, or anyone, a male or woman in foreign service? And the second is, have you been mistaken for the ambassador's wife, any of you? But we will continue this, please.
Well, I think I would share with you, because I've not been a diplomat for more than 7 months. I've been working since I was 22, and now I can honestly say I'm 54. So what can I really say about being a female diplomat? I would say that there a difference from whatever professional job you do, because basically you have a role to fill. I would say that I am a 2nd generation rule breaker. My father was a rule breaker, and he was a feminist before it was even there is a word for it. So I've been brought up biased by a male feminist, actually, for which I'm really proud. And it took me some years to actually understand that was really what he was. And that has made me who I am today, actually, I would say. So I can say that it took me a while to figure out that being a woman was different than being a man at some point, because when you have leadership positions, it's also a leadership position working as a diplomat, whether it's academic leadership or managerial leadership, running representations. So I just want to say that I don't know what of course, you get these questions. First of all, why did I actually apply for this job? I can say I didn't even think about it because I'm a woman. I think this is India. I'm here because I have international experience. I'm here because I know a lot about entrepreneurship. Hopefully they think so. They say so. So I hope that's what they think. And then I'm here because of what I do. But I can see that my leadership approach is a little bit different from what has been done early on. If that's a matter of Danish culture or if it's a gendered matter, I think it's a combination. So there are a lot of issues here to discuss, whether is it a matter of being a female diplomat or just gender-biased issues or cultural issues. So it's a mix, I would say, to that.
Can you think of an example of this cultural difference and gender difference?
Oh, definitely. I started the first day by opening the doors. I want transparency. I'm rather direct in my way of acting. I say yes and no, and just figuring out what's actually, what's behind the scenes and between the lines. That is just really one thing that I notice. My staff tell me that I'm a people person. I don't think about that, but I'm really proud when they say that. So apparently I do something different. I try to include people and I listen to what people say, but I also demand, I'm probably also, sometimes a tough cookie, they would say. I can say that from a gendered perspective, 15 years ago, I went to a seminar and they said, you can either be a bitch or a princess. What do you choose? And I really don't know what to say, because in that sense, you're always stuck between two chairs. And I must say, often I feel like that. And then you end up being sometimes the tough cookie.
Or you say yes and no, which is what...
Exactly.
But Dana, this question is broadly about women in power and how do women handle power. So tell us your experience of what it's like to be a...
Yes, I'm happy you basically changed the question, because according to answers, I want to reach a day that you can ask about the complexity of being a diplomat, because it's a profession, but with irrelevance to men and women. But we're not there yet. If I'm looking at realistically, the only uniqueness, one of the uniqueness of our profession is the fact that we have 10 years outside of our nation. And both in India and in Israel, and as we heard also from our European and in North America, we still live in a world which is the woman will follow the man. It's much more complicated if the man needs to follow the woman. So each and every one of us has a different unit at home. I'm a single mom for a child, and I brought him up by myself. There's no divorcee or something like that. And this is a conscious decision that I would maybe rather find Prince Charming, but I didn't find him. I think that one of the reasons is the fact that for many Israeli men, and we are all ambitious, men and women alike, in a family in Israel, a husband and a wife can have two careers when they are both in Israel, it will be much more complicated, because one of them has to basically put his career at halt. And in different ages, it has different ramifications. So this is the game changer when it comes to women in the profession of diplomacy, or the main game changer. And I think that in both our nations, and maybe in all our nations, there's still a way to go. And I can look at the half glass empty or the half glass full. If I'm looking at the half glass full, I sat in a room like that as a student of international relations many, many years ago. I can disclose my age. I'm going to be 15 next year. And I was finished the army. was a student around 24, 25, and I saw on the stage a senior diplomat. And you know, for a student like me, that's what I want to be. And she shared how hard she was exactly what Mr. Muttama was. She was a tough cookie, and she said everybody saw me as a secretary at the foreign ministry, and there were no other diplomats. But she got to the best positions at the end of the day, but she was one. And I was sure I will never get into the foreign ministry because it's hard and it's complicated. At the end of the day, from 2000, we were chosen 19. 8 of them were women, 11 were men, it was 2001. I was 30 then. Okay, so it seems progress. Just before I left to India 4 years ago, my last position was for 4 years. I was a director of recruitment and training of the next generation of diplomats. And I was very happy to see, with no quota, that there was parity of people entering the course. With no, she's a woman, we'll put her in. But it's the Y generation, and as you can gather already, I'm not the Y generation. And the questions from female diplomat, from the young cadets that we had, were very tough on this respect. If I want to take a maternity leave, what does it mean? Like, why do you restrict me at the end of the day for 3 months if I'm abroad because I have to go back to the position? So there are a lot of things that our foreign ministry, I imagine a lot like other foreign ministries, has a way to go. So we have around 100 missions all over the world. Only 20 of them are headed by women. So it's roughly 20%. I think 40% or 35% is the amount of female diplomats at all. But to reach the glass ceiling, but that we go into the general gender issues, not beyond the diplomacy one.
Feel free to jump in.
I must say that because I'm not brought up in our foreign ministry, I would share with you one reflection, because this is it was very positively to me to see the HR policies in the Danish foreign ministry when I arrived. It's really gender balanced. Whether it's couples working in different representations, as you also said, Nicole, or whatever compensation on family issues. I must say I was very positively surprised, because I come from private sector, and that's a very competitive field. So in that sense, on the paper, it's very gender balanced. Of course, it's also, we have to admit, you cannot be half pregnant in a service like this. Either you're in or you're out. So you have to also realize as a woman that it's a game where you have to organize yourself as a family and also as a mother, because what does it mean to be a mother? That's again the stereotypes questions we also have to talk about. That's of course a fact of life, whether you're a man or a woman. And I also think that we have to look at that as women. How do we organize ourselves? And then we can work around it. But on the piece of paper, very gender balanced Danish foreign ministry. And we have a number of strong female ambassadors and strong posts. We have directors inside, and I must say, really positively surprised to see that.
So there are two ways we can, all of us here, and I think we'll agree on this. A lot of us who are in the audience are uncomfortable with this whole woman thing. As Ravi said, Women's Day. Haven't we come beyond that? So there's one approach, which is what Dana said, and that will be the next question. What is the skill? What are the skills you need to be a diplomat? Forget the woman bit. But in truth, as all of us have said, it's not that simple. So then, do you dive into being this being a gender panel? And we all have agreed that this will be a gender panel in addition to being a diplomat panel. So that is the preamble to the next question. Talk about what's it like to be a diplomat. And regardless of, and then if you like, talk about, so what, for a person like me, what is it? Do they assign a mission and you show up and the day to day, and how do you adjust? Yeah.
I'd like to talk on this, Shoba, because I think, yes, we are all conscious of our gender. We all know that we are women. We all live lives as women in many different ways. But I think when it comes to your profession, you're very clear that you're not asking for any special favors because you're a woman. As a young officer, I learned to drive on the highways of Europe. I was told to go to the airport to pick up people at 2 and 3 in the morning. I bought my car in Paris and drove it all the way to Lisbon. And you can't put on this, I'm helpless, somebody has to help me, act. You go into it with your eyes open and you say, if I want to be treated equally, I have to behave equally. I have to take equal responsibility. And I think once you do that, you just establish yourself as a good officer. And when it comes to the home front, I've already explained that in my case, I didn't have to make, but I want to point out that all the 3 women whom I mentioned who became foreign secretaries of India, very happily married, still in their marriages, husbands very supportive, and some of them, it so happens that 2 of them, the husbands worked for the government, but not in the foreign service. One husband was in the foreign service, and they took long periods of separation from their spouses.
But the
Their
fact
children
that
were raised equally by the mother and the father. And, they've done a splendid job as foreign secretaries, as women, as mothers, as spouses. So this idea that, you have to give up that side of yourself is just not true, because a lot of people say, are you successful because you were single? I say, no, I might have been more successful if I was married, So I don't think one should think of a family as a liability or something that holds us back. I think we should think of it as a great source of strength and love and support. And, so I would actually say that what depends a lot on your attitude. You have to speak up. You have to be heard. I agree with you, Marjorie. There's a certain tendency of women to be a little diffident when there's a room full of 20 little grey men in little grey suits to say, listen to me, because you want to wait. You keep raising your hand and waiting for somebody to call you. But you get over that fairly soon. If you've got some spunk and determination, you dive right in, and then after that they realize you are talking sense and they do listen to you. And once my style of diplomacy is described as the iron fist in a velvet glove by a French diplomat.
Anyone wants to add to that? Because I have a point of view. So Latha, to your point, my mother-in-law is an accomplished IAS officer, and her view is similar to yours, which is that gender I will overcome. It is my issue. I'm not even going to assume that that's an issue. I will do my best. I'm a bit 50-50. It is my issue and society's issue. I have an 18-year-old daughter. She calls out society's biases left and right. In her mind, it is not her issue. It is society's issue to fix. Yeah. So that's what I mean when I say, where do you all fall with respect to this whole skills? What are the skills to be a diplomat? What are the skills to be a female diplomat? Is that, whose issue is it? Yeah.
The skills of being a diplomat, we've done kind of of the diplomat of the 21st century. Our foreign ministry has done a lot of investigation in the recruitment. And basically we identify 4 clusters of what do we want and need in a good diplomat that will represent our country. And the first basket or cluster is management skills and agility, because you have to improvise. There's no manual to be a diplomat. Like even this session, okay, we've spoken for many times, but still there's like nuances. Iran, should we relate? How would we relate? If I'm and there's no manual. I can't take out this note. And now I'm saying this. So this is one cluster. The second cluster is curiosity and the willingness to learn constantly. And that's one of the things I love most about my profession, because I can reinvent myself every couple of years, learning and diving into new arena, new world. My first posting was in the States, in another southern consulate in Houston, Texas, and now I'm in southern India. And in order to connect our nations, I have to dive in and learn so much about India and learn so much constantly about my own country to better connect. So the second basket is curiosity and learning. The third basket is international relationship skills. That's not the right word I'm translating from Hebrew, but it's basically your personality. How do you connect? At the end of the day, is connecting people. In the beginning of our diplomatic, we're basically working encyclopedia. They were extremely smart, but some of them could not communicate with people. You have to have this balance. So that's the third basket of, and in this respect, intercultural. How you sensitive to different culture and so on and so forth. The fourth cluster, which is very hard to predict, is basically your resilience. Because an Israeli diplomat, so much like in every diplomat, there are so many changes. We live in an uncertain world. It's not. But for diplomatic points, you are constantly changing and constantly interacting with other people, and your team is changing, and your consul general or your deputy is changing. It's constant rotation, and you have to have resilience. And you have also back home, you have a spouse, and you have kids, and you have to take care of their resilience. So we are trying to predict if this person who is applying for the position, who dreamt of being the ambassador in the UN or in India, he has the resilience to act, whether it's time of crisis or in a regular time. Will his family cope? So those are the 4 clusters that we're looking at. This, as you can see, there's no gender here. It's person. If a person can and wants and is able to represent his own country or her own country.
Nicole. So that is a wonderfully comprehensive answer. I'm going to come at your question with a little bit of a different take, my 2 cents, and you can feel free to vehemently disagree or add. But I'm not sure that the skills needed to be a diplomat are going to be that much different whether you're a woman or a man. But what I would say is that girls and women are socialized in a particular way, and there's a long evidence base behind that. And what that suggests to me from my career and my 5 years as a diplomat, and what I've observed from my wonderfully competent and effective female colleagues, is there are some elements of the skill set where women may need to put particular focus as diplomats in order to be effective. Now, one of the examples I would give about that is life as a negotiation. And somebody has already mentioned how essential it is to be effective at persuasion, informal negotiation, and formal negotiation as a diplomat. But women are socialized to be nice, not to make waves, to give and not necessarily to expect anything in return. And I have made a special point in my career as an executive with the teams that I've had and the women leaders that I've had to say, if you can really work on this particular skill set, it'll be life-changing in terms of what you're able to achieve in your work. And there are also skills that are good on the home front. That's one point I would make.
Sorry, Nicole. The skill set being persuasion and negotiation.
Yes. And then on the advantage side, where there's also some evidence to back this up, is, when you're a woman executive and manager and a woman diplomat, as others have said, there's so much that you have to juggle. You have to be an effective manager, you'll have to be effective relationally when you're interacting, with people at varying levels in the host country and so on and so forth. And you have a lot of demands and you have long hours. And we as women apparently have the advantage that we're somehow wired differently than men in our ability to multitask. So, I would sort of suggest to you that is an area where, women can deploy their natural abilities in that area to good effect in diplomacy. And then the third thing I would say, is maybe not so orthodox. And that is when you join the Foreign Service late, you become aware very quickly that there are certain ways that things have always been done. There are certain ways that things are done here, that we will do things, that we will solve problems. I don't know if this sounds familiar. And I think that's not limited to diplomacy or the Foreign Service. But if you really have to achieve results in solving a problem, which is a duty that we all share as diplomats, sometimes it behooves you to apply a little bit of creativity. And I think, this is an area in which both women and men, have some talent and some ability, and maybe some women may have a little more willingness to try things. Jette, you've already referred to sort of being a rule breaker. So I think that fits in that category. And so I'm very much a proponent and a fan of leveraging that creativity, your own or your team's, to solve practical problems for constructive results as a skill.
I'm going to come back to both of you, but yeah, Marjorie and Nicole.
Well, I really agree with the set of skills. I agree with the fact that it's not particularly nor feminine nor masculine, or there is enough to balance. I just want to say that there is also not much of a difference between the situation of female diplomats and females who work in general. It just happens that because the way the career is made, you go against those difficulties in a more visible way, because, for instance, and not just about pursuing two careers in parallel, it's just about asking someone, your significant other, to just drop his career or just to put it into brackets, so to speak, for a while. And also the fact that we practically work round the clock. It's not just a 9-to-5 job. You're expected to work on weekends, not just if there's a crisis, it's just people expect you, especially when you become head of mission. This is what I've been discovering very recently, that people expect you to work on Sunday, and I've accepted, conferences without knowing, it's going to be on Saturday night. And I wasn't, for me it was a given that I would not work on Saturday and Sunday, but yes, I'm expected to do that. So it just becomes more visible. And because of that, it's not much difference. So I think we're a great laboratory for other females who work in any type of profession. And also, what I often say in our Female Diplomat Association is that the difficulties we have, it's also difficulties that men have, and they're not really aware of them. For instance, they've taken for granted that they're not supposed to take care that much of kids. It's still the case. Even in my country, we're still struggling to have a longer paternity leave. Some countries, I was based in Spain previously, they just extended to several weeks. And in France, it's still 11 days when a baby's born. Paternity leave. So how do you expect to take care of a child in 11 days or even get to know it? So these are the things as a society that we need to work on. So there are things that have been taken away from them. So this unbalance, and that's why we try to work with men. And but so I was, like yourself, Jette, I was lucky enough to be born in a family where, I was raised with a brother, and my parents made no difference. So then I went into the world and discovered people made a difference. So it was a surprise, it was a shock. So now I try to play with it. I try to play with it because to me there are things that are obvious, like, I love to take care of my child, but his father loves that too. So you can play with the stereotypes a little bit. And also because we're diplomats, you happen to work in such an environment that people actually project some stereotypes upon you. So,
for example?
For example, very recently, I'm a little bit naughty, so I wanted to get out of a social event. And I went up to the organizer and I said, it's been very nice. Been here 15 minutes. I'm quite bored, actually. I've got a 2-year-old waiting at home. And he looked at me and said, oh, my goodness, you should be home. Absolutely. Go back to your family. And I say, bye. And I was quite, it's not going to change his way of looking at women. Yeah. But still, I got away with it. And I was happy because I didn't make a... But it's interesting. So it was here, by the way. Sorry.
Bangalore has to do better.
No, yeah,
yes.
But yeah, no. But it could have happened in Spain in my previous posting as well. Yeah. I mean, these things... So to put it in a nutshell, it's really about a society change, I guess, little by little, everybody doing their bit. That's the reason why, even when I'm not sure I've got something interesting to say in a meeting, I make sure, I raise my hand and say something, because...
After Jette.
I would say we have one word, Dana, I really also support what you say, but we in the Danish Foreign Ministry, we have one value we call musicality. And that's actually regarding everything in the complexity that we do as an orchestra, and how do we juggle around this with our musicality. So musicality is actually a value. How is that actually then perceived, and how do we then execute that musicality? That's probably the difference between men and women. or male and female ways of doing things, because there's in English we can let's say divide between gender and sex. So it's a gender-based approach to a musicality of how you behave. So I think that's actually the first time that I have come across musicality as a value, and I think it's covering very well of what we do. I have one specific advice I heard from the former Minister of Energy in Denmark. It's a woman, she's really strong, and she said, especially to women, don't ever go to any event without having prepared at least 3 questions. So at least you can ask one question, because most people in the audience do never ask questions. So that is really one specific advice that I also tell to my team members. If you go to something, have a question prepared, because nobody ever asks a question. I don't know whether you're allowed to ask any questions, but
Yes,
basically that is one advice. How do you become visible based on what you might know, or what you think, or what you would like to know more about? It's actually asking more questions in the surroundings where you are, and by then actually trying to visualize what you can actually do, not who you really are as a man or a woman. So that was one specific advice for one of our former ministers.
So ask more questions. How do men behave in the musicality arena, and are they orchestra conductors, which is the stereotype, and how do women behave in the musicality?
Well, it's a very interesting question, because it's difficult for me to answer because we are all individuals, so I would also be a little bit cautious about that. Of course, we're probably historically famous of being in a bit of a tough ministry, because we have foreign policy, and as everybody else also have confirmed here, that it's a complexity that we have to handle. We are on 24/7, so of course there are some conditions that you cannot say, I don't want to be part of these conditions. So that's probably a little bit, difficult to answer in
Sure.
one easy go. But I think what is interesting now, we talk about climate policies, we talk about green policies, we talk about sustainability. That suddenly becomes very kind of soft issues, but on the other hand, it's also very tough issues, because we're trying to solve difficult problems. So in that sense, the world is calling upon different ways of acting, and we can definitely see that a lot of the male CEOs from the Danish corporates, they are being very soft on these issues, and I think that's a game changer in terms of how we behave and how we address leadership and how we address fixing difficult problems.
So I have a question for each of you, which is a takeoff on what you all said. What is the skill that you struggle with in the list that you gave for what it means to be a female diplomat, and how do you push yourself in that area? So you said negotiation was important. You said pivoting depending on situation, playing with it was important. You said just go above it, Latha, and you gave us 4 baskets. But if you were to make it personal, which of those baskets do you struggle with, and how do you overcome it? Or Nicole should, yeah.
So I'll give a sort of a really personal answer to that. And for me, the struggle is to communicate in more of a soft way. And it's obviously really key in our profession to be able to adapt the messaging to the audience, to the circumstance, to what is required. And I'm sure you're all sort of familiar with the idea that, if a young girl is, if she's direct, if she's aggressive, if she's bossy, then those are undesirable traits. But in a young boy and a young man and a man, those are considered leadership traits. I'm a type A personality. I'm the oldest of 5 children, and I was born with those traits. And it took me some time to realize that, my family was trying to balance out so that I had other, communication competencies as well. And I've worked on those in my professional career, because it's very, very important when you want to be effective in this kind of role to have those different communication skills at your disposal. And so from a woman, that may be a less frequent or expected answer, but I have no, like Jette, I have no problem saying no and saying this is what I want and we need to, do it better, or how can we do it better? What ideas do you have? And so there you go.
Are you softening because you're a woman, or are you softening because you're a person?
No, I'm softening where the situation requires, not because I think someone might expect it of me because I'm a woman. You know, I've come along to the idea that, you know, authentic leadership has its place. It's something that I've always believed in. So I am who I am, and I lead the way that I am. But I had some really effective, you know, mentors and supporters in my career who sort of pointed out to me that if I wanted to get the desired results, and I think there are all things that we work on as professionals, you know, and that's just mine because you asked.
Anyone else? What do you work on? What is the struggle, and how do you overcome it?
I think for me, the struggle, and I still struggle with it, is that everything's come very easy, you know, and I was never nervous about public speaking. I was never nervous. I don't know why, but I think I was born without the fear gene, which was probably a good thing. Huh? But, you know, as a result, because it's easy for me to learn, it's easy for me to pick up a few facts and play with them and speak around them and weave an anecdote out of them and so on. So I often regret that I don't go deep enough into issues. And one of the things that I've loved about being deeply involved in cyber issues after I retired from the Foreign Service is I didn't have this distraction, you know, having to be a jack of all trades. One day talk about culture, one day talk about economics, one day talk about politics. But I could just take one subject and devote myself to it and go deep into it and actually do the research and speak about it with knowledge and with authority. But every now and then I find myself relapsing because it's very easy to just rehash the last thing you did and say it all over again. But I really try, you know, now to be more mindful about the fact that I really need to refresh my knowledge, go deep into a subject, research, and have that respect for my audience that I will try to actually speak from a position of strength and knowledge rather than just use my oratorical skills or the fact that I'm, you know, able to get away with speaking convincingly. It's laziness that I would say is my weakness.
Yes.
Yes.
I share this with you, but I come from an academic background, as you mentioned. So I think the thing I work most upon myself is the insecurity, because I always feel I don't master a topic well enough to speak about it. And the fact that I have to be even more so now, jack of all trades, makes me very nervous. So, and it's also, you know, it's also a documented fact that women tend to want to be perfectly, you know, informed.
Yes.
And they're perfectionists. So, and so they don't apply for jobs because they don't think they're good enough. They don't, you know, speak up in a meeting because they think they say what they're going to say is not interesting and not going to make a point. And I'm a little bit like that by training and. Probably because still I've got some gender thing about me, so this is what I struggle with.
Yeah, Jette.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting what you say, because, I mean, now I passed 50. I finally learned to say, okay, relax a little bit about that, because I think that's a general female issue, and we have a lot of evidence on that you want to be, you know, the perfectionism, the ability to, are you a specialist or are you a generalist? Because if you move from a specialist role into a generalist managerial role, which we all doing here, that's also a transition that you have to learn to do. So that's a skill, that's a transition, and that's something that can be trained. I must say, when I applied for this job, and I got a number of questions on that, they say, so why did you apply and what do you have to do? And I just saw the first line and it said innovation and India, and here I go. And then I thought, I'll figure out what it is, because I basically didn't know what I was going to do, other than I could, you know, see the headlines and see that I probably can do this and that. And then I've been out on postings before from the private sector. So I wasn't that worried. Of course, that's probably also rather good, because then they told me you have one of the most busy positions that you can ever have, because I have 4 different hats and I have no deputy. Okay, I didn't know. Congratulations. So basically, I think I wished I had learned this 20 years ago. So I hope that generation-wise, we're also in a different stage than when we were back in the 80s. And I have hope for the new generation in that sense, that On the other hand, in Denmark, we have a lot of issues. We have this say about A+ girls, that if a girl doesn't get an A+, she gets stressed. We have a lot of talks about depression, about young people not feeling well because they are too stressed about the world in general and what they have to do. That's a girl thing and that's a boy thing. But for the girl things, it's about wanting to be a perfectionist. And I'm really worried about this tendency, because are we then going to have a vicious circle again? Or can we just do, shake your shoulders a little bit and relax, because everything will work out. We cannot be experts in everything, because if we have to do that, we'll not be experts in anything. So we have to include people, and we have to learn to do that. And I think that's where women are really good in terms of leadership. We are including people, we dare ask questions. If we ask questions, we look like fools, and we live with that, because that's a managerial decision that it could be we know the answers, but we decide to include people. And I think that's a core dilemma that I'm often caught in, because I look like I don't know what's going on, because I ask people. I have my team, they are really well specialized in a number of areas. Why on earth should I be the one with the right question? That's also regarded as a weakness. I think it's a strong point, but it could be regarded as a weakness in a male managerial strategic model, if you want to be a little bit in that, kind of work.
Dana. So women internalize deficiencies, they are perfectionist. And as Marjorie said, there's also a study that says once a woman is interrupted in a meeting, it takes her a lot longer to come back whereas men interrupt each other all the time, and then the round two is very quick again. But Dana, what do you struggle with, and how have you overcome it?
First of all, I know that throughout all of my 4 colleagues, because I share the same. I think that in a way I chose, being a diplomat is the most it's very challenging for a woman because of this perfectionism and take the leap, but you have to take the leap. Like for me, I'm relatively tall to the good old days, and I don't want to pop out. I don't want to be shown, but I chose a profession that you have to be shown, that you have to represent. And when you enter a room, and I'm tall, so I'm noticeable, and it's an asset for a diplomat, but for a female, and for me personally, it's a challenge. But at the end of the day, I chose this profession. At the end of the day, I don't have your gene. I am afraid, and I want to be perfectionist when I speak, and I know all my flaws, and I highlight my flaws as a perfectionist. It's much so the energy to be for me to be in my profession is probably greater than other male diplomat. But I think that at the end of the day, if you take the leap, if you really and you don't have to think the same way as Jette, you dive in. I took 1 year leave of absence from the foreign ministry because I wanted to see if there is an alternative for me. So I went. I heard a VC guy he had the Midas touch. He touched an Israeli startup, and he was acquired by billions and millions of dollars. And he had a non-profit that is. He wanted to change our capital, Jerusalem. And he came and he spoke and he recruited people from the foreign ministry to come and work at his NGO. And at the evening, I found myself for the first time being assertive/aggressive, and I wrote him an email. I would like to join your team. This is my bio. I want something. I'm doing something which is for me a calling and ideological, but I want to see if I can do something from within, not go abroad. And he called me and we chatted, and he offered me to run the NGO. The same way I saw the headlines, it had 2 arms. I can do only one arm or do both arms together as a MD. And I don't know why, but I said, okay, I'll be your MD. And I took 1 year leave of absence. And the calling of being an ambassador and to represent my country overcome me, even though he wanted me then to join his VC and so on. So I went back to the foreign ministry. But what when I meet young female that are on the verge of the beginning of their career, what I urge them is to dare. Yes, we are all aware of our flaws, but you have to take the leap. And it's hard and it's frustrating and you pay a lot of energy at home, but it's worthwhile.
So we are at question time, but I have one last question, actually two. In one sentence, which is the country or culture that surprised you? Because we all have stereotypes about cultures. So let's make it which culture and why? And then what I wish I had known, what quality I wish I had when I was 18, and one word. So for me, it would be fearlessness, but Latha, you already had it. But you should say, which country surprised you or culture surprised you and why in one sentence, and which quality, what I wish I had when I was 18, which quality, and then we will take questions. So whoever's ready.
I can start. It's definitely India.
Culture surprised you.
Yes.
India surprised you.
Yes.
And why?
It's so diverse, and you never know what to expect. So I'm really enjoying it, daily here. And there's a generosity and openness that are, wonderful, especially when you come from Europe. It's a never-ending surprise. Yeah.
And what quality you wish you had at 18? One word.
I was tougher than I'm now, so I would say yes. I wish I'd been kinder.
Okay. And anyone else who's ready to or pass? Yeah.
I think for me, the country that surprised me most was South Africa, because I was sent there in 1994. I knew nothing or very little. I knew about Gandhiji and his being thrown off the train in Pietermaritzburg and so on and so forth, but I didn't know what to expect, actually, and I was very, very surprised. And it was because the events that happened were so surprising, because I met Nelson Mandela, and I went to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. It was a time of great hope and optimism, and I saw races coming together. I saw white employers driving their black employees to the polling stations to vote, and all of them standing in line. And I danced on the streets with the people after the elections, and it was really a rainbow nation, and I felt this was really an example for the world. I mean, it may not have succeeded entirely, but till today, South Africa functions, and there is no return to apartheid. There are still people of all the races living there together. For me, that was amazing.
And the 18-year-old?
And the 18-year-old, I think...
Or what would you tell the 18-year-old? Here's a quality that I bequeath to you, that I wish you would have. That would change
I would say wisdom. I don't think I was very wise at 18. I made a lot of very foolish choices. And the only reason I did become a diplomat finally, like what many of you have said, my father was a very important influence in my life. I don't think the women in my family influenced me as much as the men. My father, my grandfather, my brother, they were my role models.
And anyone else? Yeah. Yeah.
The country that surprised me was the States, which I think it's like, you can say some exotic, but I was 30, that was my 31, my first posting as a Deputy Consul General in Houston, Texas, to south of the States. And what do you know about the States when you were in Israel back days? There was a series called Dallas. Maybe the older generation like me are maybe familiar with that, but it's like all those cowboys and J.R. Ewing and like the oil whales and so on and so forth. So that's what I was expecting, the big ranches. And that's what I got, but not just. And I got the diversity of the United States. And we can speak about the diversity of India and the good and the dichotomies of India, but there are a share of dichotomies and differences in the States. And I was I never knew, but I was in a Bible Belt region with a very close affinity to my homeland. And it was very, very interesting to I took the fact that I was a farmer in the north of Israel, living close to Nazareth, where Jesus was born, was the Annunciation, and living for 10 years in Jerusalem, and walked the footsteps of Jesus. When I went to the Bible Belt of the United States, I basically rediscovered the importance of my country in this respect. And I think it's a unique revelation. What would I have liked to
what quality would you capture at 18 that you will say, okay, young girl, if I can give you this will see you through?
I think it's confidence and believing in myself.
Yeah, 2 people said that.
But it's basically, I think, for every female, and I have to tell you that, yes, it seems, I think that when you will hear me speak and say, she's I won't say any nasty word, but she's making fun of us. Yeah. It's not true. But still, yes, I'm speaking. I'm holding a mic. I'm speaking to an audience. But still, I want that, especially for my child. Never mind, he's a boy, so it's supposed to be easier. But I want to instill in him the fact that he can make it, the competence. To see the flaws, but to really be confident and to believe in yourself. And I think it's a constant struggle for me.
Besides, let's say, India, which is, there are so many things still for me that are so positively surprising. I want to share with you that I was building up business in the former East and Central Europe just after the wall came down, the Berlin Wall. And that was probably one of the most striking experiences for me, because the humbleness you learn and actually getting to do business with people who have just received freedom after so many years behind the wall, so close to my own country, where we were like, the yolk and the egg. That was really a humble experience and a learning experience. And that is why still that celebration of the Berlin Wall to me means so much, because it just changed so many things in how we regard the world in itself, equality, what is democracy, and all these things. So that means a lot to me still today. About when I was 18, I already said, I wished I'd known 20 years ago. I have 2 sons, 23 and 24. And the most important thing I would like to tell them also, Dana, as you say, is like, try to figure out what's really important to you, not to do what others expect you to do. I would still like to become a medical doctor, and I'm not. And I have spent 20 years figuring out how I could do it besides, in the evening when I'm not at work, because that's just my old dream. I want to treat diseases, and I think it's really, really exciting. And now I'm probably getting too old for that. I was trying to see how I could get a biotechnology bachelor just because I think it's fun. And I'm almost 55. People think I'm crazy. So I still have that dream.
And Nicole.
These are all really wonderful stories. So mine, in terms of surprise, is... so in terms of my background, I was born in the Middle East, and then we moved to Eastern Europe when I was a toddler. And then when I was about 7 or 8, we moved to Rome. And that was a formative experience for me. It was a huge surprise for me, and it was the first foreign country that I really remembered living in, where, there was this very ancient culture that was fascinating to me, all of this amazing, beautiful art, incredible food that was different from what I had at home. It's like I had never eaten anything good before in my life, before I moved to a foreign country. And that's had such a profound impact on me in terms of all the countries that I've visited and that I've lived in. So I have to tell you, I'm a big foodie. I'm a big fan of Indian food, especially spicy food. And I take that spirit of curiosity, of openness, of friendship with me everywhere I go, and I find that it's served me really well in my current role. In terms of your other question, what I wish I had known at 18, I'll come back to Latha's point, I wasn't born without the fear gene. And I had this horrendous fear of any form of public speaking. And if someone had told me when I was 18 that I would be in a role that required me to give a few speeches every week, I would have said, okay, well, strike me down with lightning now. But what I would say to young people is a little bit kind of riffing off what Jette was saying was, don't allow your fears to limit your choices in terms of things you could accomplish in life, because even things at a young age that might seem insurmountable are things that you can really work on if you've got the drive and the desire to attain goals that might require you to develop those skills, as I did and as others have done.
Fearlessness, playful, persuasion, passion.
Mine was
wisdom, and figure out what you want to do. I'm sorry we have 10 minutes for questions, but it's a large panel, so yes. Lekha. Okay, I will point. So she raised the lady in red. And since there are many, please ask the question.
Hello, my name is Beena, and I live here in Bangalore. First of all, I am thrilled to see a stage with strong, sensible women, yes, and very beautifully moderated, so thank you. My very quick question is, I used to run a business and I learned certain things which, I wish somebody had told me earlier. One is don't take the money. The second thing, which is, this is the question to each of you, particularly Denmark, how have you been able to change the molecules in the room to change the narrative? Because I was brought up in a very patriarchal society, not family, society, to accept that the mansplaining is the way things are going to be. So I wasn't
Great question. How do you change the molecules to change the narrative?
Well, I would say that I have been very, very fortunate to have some very strong men and women around me where I seek advice. So I have to learn to be alone with whatever I want to do. So changing molecules. I had one situation where I once was in a company where I suggested that we should close the company. It took 12 months before my hypothesis or predictions or analysis actually came through. The company was closed, but they hated me for 12 months. I had to live with that. They said, you can't do business with her, she's not reliable. They were actually pointing out to that I couldn't be trusted, and they were playing with that they wanted me to feel stupid. Congratulations, who wants to feel stupid? Nobody wants to do that. So basically I had to live with that, and of course I seek advice in my network, women and men. I've had some very good bosses who have been supportive in whatever I did. So I knew my kind of scope and frame of work of where I could maneuver. And in that, let's say, football playground, I had freedom to do whatever I wanted to do, basically. So that was my luck. So I would say, how do you change molecules? Try not to change everything yourself and think you have to do everything yourself. Find role models. And also, we've had some very strong NGO organizations that I have been active in. So I have sought advice and knowledge also to other women who have done the same before me.
So Shri, and then her, and then the man in the back.
Yeah, very quickly, I think all of us in Bangalore are very privileged to have such able female diplomats amongst us in Bangalore as Consul Generals. So after saying that, I have a quiz question, which perhaps Shoba can use next time. Can anybody name the Indian woman who was with Eleanor Roosevelt when the drafting of the Human Rights Declaration took place? Quick.
She's in Washington. I can't remember her name.
Hansa Mehta.
Hansa Mehta, thank you.
And I wanted to tell you that 1947, 1948, because, I work for the United Nations, so maybe that's the Human Rights Declaration was not the Human Rights Declaration. It was a declaration of rights for men. And the first sentence, she changed it to human rights. That was Hansa Mehta for you.
Thank you.
She was later a member of the Constituent Assembly of India. So that's your next quiz question. Sure. My last point is that in 1995, when we did the World Women's Conference, which was at Beijing, and we had After that, we had 5 years after that, year 2000. And like this assembly of able women, the heads of the organizations of the UN, WFP, Nafis Sadiq from UNFPA, Carol Bellamy from UNICEF, and then McCready from Human Rights. They were all there, and I have to tell you what they said. And I was the anchor, and I said, who inspired you? And like all of you said, it was our fathers. So I just want to tell you that little has changed since year 2000 to year 2020. Thank you again.
And the lady over there, the man over there. We only have 5 minutes, so just please.
I have a question on international relations. I'm very curious to know, how sanctions work and how. I guess where I'm coming from is, when North Korea is going and testing these missiles, the US just has to say, we're going to impose tougher sanctions on you. It seems like the economic isolation is the most powerful weapon to kind of contain a country's behavior. So I'm intrigued about this, and I want to know if any of you had an opportunity to kind of participate or impose
Great
sanctions.
question. Diplomacy in the time of sanctions. Yeah. And Latha requesting to make it fast for that.
Very
so that,
just to say that, when the US imposed sanctions, which still continue, on Iran, I was involved in the negotiation with Iran because we had to find a way to pay for the oil that we were buying. And because banking channels were closed, because the banks were told that if they actually transmitted money to Iran, they would be penalized. So Indian banks weren't willing to do it. We asked the Iranians to suggest a country, an international bank in another country, through which we could make the payment. So it was long and tortuous negotiations. And this is an example of where, you can actually see how it affects you, because you can't buy and sell from that nation, even if it's a very essential commodity like oil. I hope that answers the question.
the man over there. And let me see if I have a minute.
So a sincere question, just to understand the reality. So for a bright, aspiring officer, female officer, which one is more supportive boss, a female boss or a male boss?
Who would like to answer that? Who is a more supportive boss, a female boss or a male boss? A good, yeah. And the lady over here, last question. Yeah. Your voice is loud, yes.
My question is for Dana and for Nicole. If you were to give diplomatic advice to Donald Trump, what is the kind of impact that a diplomat can have in a situation that we find ourselves in today?
Okay. Dana and Nicole specifically, and then you can be the last, yes. But you have no advice for Donald Trump?
I think I would plead the fifth, as he might say, on The Apprentice or something similar. Maybe just on the question of, who is the more supportive boss, I would more come at that from, I'm a deep believer in merit. Women and men can equally be fantastic bosses, supportive bosses. I've had some wonderful mentors, men and women, in my career. So it really comes down to the people who've worked hard on those competencies and who want to lead their employees, with integrity and to the best of their ability is how I would answer that.
For Donald, it's 7:57, 3 minutes. So any advice for Donald Trump?
My role as an Israeli diplomat is to give advices to my prime minister. And my prime minister is a supporter of the policies of the president of the United States. But I think it's beyond that. I think that when you look at the leader, never mind which one, we can look here in India, we can look back home in my home, or we can look at the States and other places. It's much more prevalent today. You have a very complex personality with things that you like and things that you didn't like. But you need to have, at the end of the day, to be a leader, guts. And democracy, it's 2020, there are going to be an election here in the States now. So I let the American people decide what happens, and I can't advise him till then. It's going to be lame duck season soon. But at the end of the day, I think it's a privilege, and I think that all of us, even some of us who just jumped into diplomacy for longer or a shorter duration, I think that we enjoy the fact that we can be experts in giving an honest opinion to a leader of all the complicated situation of the international arena, and he or she can take the call, and then they have to look back inside home and all the ramifications back home. And there are times that I'm very proud of our foreign ministry, because I see that we have a voice in the political situation, in the decision-making process. And there are times and eras, like the time now in our foreign ministry, that I see it much less. And then I wish that you would give me the mic and say, what can I say to my prime minister back home, not to the president of the States.
Thank you. Yes, for the last question. So I work in Bangalore in an area where we're helping students from India to plan their careers. So looking to the future, what I'd like to ask you all is there's a very big, strong move towards getting students to work on STEM-related careers, STEM, and especially women to get into that area. Now, what you're suggesting is women to get into diplomacy. What would you say to parents and students who are trying to look at those two choices? Which should they choose?
STEM or diplomacy? I mean, is it that even a choice? Maybe the people who haven't spoken, yeah. Marjorie, do you, I mean, you're
STEM or diplomacy?
I guess her question is STEM is being focused on, and how would you have a PhD in the culture and humanities, so should STEM be focused on? Is that a fair, yeah?
STEM as in STEM?
STEM as in STEM, science, technology.
Oh.
Yeah, engineer. So
well, I think they should do both. I think they should, I had a wonderful first part of career doing humanities and research in art history, and I'm now enjoying and having the privilege of serving my country in a different way. So I think we now live in a world where people are going to have 2, maybe 3, maybe 4 careers, and we've got examples here. So they shouldn't choose.
So Marjorie's life is her message. She is a diplomat and and who has a PhD in humanities. So it's a tough question, but maybe you can meet them later. Thank you for your insights, your candor, and your honesty. Yeah.
Thank you, Shoba. Thank you, Shoba. Shoba, to our moderator.